Good afternoon, I'm Valerie Pritchett, anchor for ABC 27 News, and I'm happy to be here with you today to serve as your moderator for today's conversations with women who make a difference, and we have plenty of them in our communities. I am also a member of the United Way Women's Leadership Network, and I also serve on the United Way Capital Region's Board of Directors. On behalf of the United Way of the Capital Region, I would like to thank our sponsors who make this possible. Our gold sponsors, Highmark Blue Shield and Penn State Health. Our silver sponsors, Brown, Schultz, Sheridan and Fritz, the Hershey Company, KPMG LLP, Penn National Insurance, and of course, JPL. We would also like to thank the United Way Foundation for its support. Today, we are here at JPL in a very big building, and we are socially distanced, not wearing masks when we are not, when we can't social distance. So we want you to know that we are being very safe as we go through our conference today. Amy Smith from Deloitte Consulting is joining us virtually. This afternoon, we will discuss the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the reckoning of racial injustices that are happening in our country. These issues have magnified the importance of access to health care, mental health awareness, and racial equality. At a time when we need to come together and want to come together, we are still socially distanced. We know these are both powerful topics with significant content to discuss. For today's event, we will go back and forth between the topics as we are experiencing these issues simultaneously. Our Women's Leadership Network has always been a place where we can come together to learn from one another and support the important work the United Way does in our community. While this is our first virtual event, the foundation of WLN remains the same. We are a dynamic, and I'm going to say that again, a dynamic group of women committed to improving the lives of others in our community. We want to hear from you today. So this is not just going to be all us. We're going to hope you have great questions that you're going to ask our panelists. So please submit your questions to the link in the description. It should be above my head in the video viewing window. A separate window will open, allowing you to submit your questions while watching the broadcast at the same time. We will try to answer all of your questions, but if we don't, we will be able to respond to them after we finish our event today. Let's start by meeting our panel members. I would like to ask each panel member to introduce themselves and tell us briefly about their profession. And we're going to start with Amy.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Amy Smith, and I am the diversity and equity leader for Deloitte. And I work with 60,000 plus professionals to help shepherd their talent experience and to make sure that we are focused on a diverse representation within the firm, and that also we're taking care of our professionals, not only their career, but also their whole self, which includes their mental well-being and their physical wellness. Thanks.
Nixon, Vice President of Mission Effectiveness, Diversity and Inclusion for UPMC Pinnacle. My role is to conduct the community health needs assessment as well as community benefits, in addition to providing cultural competency, diversity and inclusion programs throughout our 7 hospital system here in South Central Pennsylvania.
And our next panelist.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl Dellasega. I'm a professor in the Department of Humanities at the Penn State College of Medicine. I'm also a volunteer with several different agencies serving vulnerable women in the Harrisburg area. I am an author of books on women and relationships, and I'm the founder of Club and Camp Ophelia for Girls.
Thank you, Cheryl. And I do want to remind you again that you can submit your questions to the box that'll be above my head, and we look forward to hearing from you. Let's start with our first question for all the panel members. In your role, what needs are you seeing right now? Amy?
Yeah, so 2020 has been an extraordinary year for us at Deloitte. I would say even before COVID hit, we dealt with a very tragic death of one of our leaders in our practice. So we had started a practice-wide mental health conversation probably back in February. And then on the heels of that, we shut down our offices over a weekend. And then I'm sure as everyone else has been experiencing, also a movement around racial justice, which impacts a lot of our professionals. So I would say that our new reality is about distant work locations and helping people combat loneliness. It's about new health concerns and the state of the world, particularly here in the United States, which cultivates intense anxiety. We're all balancing new roles. I'm a mother, so particularly being a professional and also being caregivers in new ways. And then finally, I think because we aren't leaving our houses, boundaries have become a little bit blurred. And so we have a lot of burnout happening.
Yeah, that's true. Cheryl, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that I would echo a lot of those same things that Amy said. I also do a lot of work with nurses at Penn State Health, and I'm seeing them on the front line of providing care. Nurses are really superheroes. I'm a nurse. And so I see that role definitely needing addressed.
Tina?
So from my perspective, the need is great in two different ways that kind of come together. The impact of COVID on communities of color and the need of that individuals face being able to work and provide for their families. And as Cheryl said, you know, our nurses and our frontline workers that are impacted by the numbers of COVID patients that are coming into our facility, but also collectively individuals that are impacted and traumatized by the racism, and I will say the race pandemic that is happening throughout our country. So we right now there are a lot of moving parts in what we are doing and how we address the needs of our community and the needs of our staff who are overworked and overwhelmed by everything that's going on right now.
Now you're talking about your staff, but what about you as individuals? I know that my job has changed quite a bit, added responsibilities since COVID hit and other things that are going on. How has your job changed as well? Let's start with Cheryl.
Sure. Well, I'm a grandmother, so I've taken on some extra childcare responsibility to support my kids who are essential workers. But I think I've ramped up my volunteer work significantly. I was down at the YMCA helping with showers for people who are on the street who were suddenly turned out with no resources. And I'm thinking my research has escalated in areas of serving unmet needs in this region. So I think that that has all changed significantly for me.
Tina?
So my role has changed, especially in the last 6 months, going from providing education and training around diversity and inclusion and cultural competency to simply providing a safe space for individuals to share and really listen to what's being said instead of listening to respond, allowing people to have a safe space just to answer the question, how are you feeling and what's going on with you? So it's changed a little bit, and it will continue to change as we continue to navigate through, like I said, racism and COVID and things that impact our communities.
Amy?
My job has changed in that, pre-COVID, I spent a lot of time personally traveling around the country so that I could meet people in different places, meet clients in different places. That stopped, which actually I would probably call that a positive benefit of COVID. Not that I can't see my clients face to face, but that I'm home with my 6 and 10-year-old. It's been nice. And then I think from a work perspective, similar to what the other panelists have said, we went from a lowercase p proactive stance around trying to raise conversations about mental health and racism within raise the conversation within our walls on those topics to now I would say we are, talking about it every day. We have less ability to be proactive because things keep happening and the news cycle is changing, and we have to meet our practitioners where they are and make sure that we're taking care of them, even when it's things that are outside of our control.
Yeah. Having conversations with colleagues around racial injustice can be a bit uncomfortable, and many people want to talk about the issue, but they're not really quite sure where to start. So what advice can you offer? And I want to start with Tina on this one.
So my advice is to do your research, read, again, find someone that you can sit and have a conversation with around how they've been impacted and what that's like, and really listen with an empathetic ear. I think a lot of times we try to solve problems so quickly that we're really not understanding what's going on. Again, I go back to what I said before, just asking a simple question instead of saying, hey, how are you doing? Which we've all been triggered to say fine without thinking. Ask a question like, how are you feeling today? Or, what top 3 feelings are you having? So I think it's taking it to another level of trying to have that interpersonal connection and communication. But there's tons of resources out there around racism and what you can do to understand and address it within the workplace and how to go about having conversations about it. So just do your homework is what I would say people would need to do.
Amy.
I echo Tina's sentiment. I would say that we do a lot to create an open and comfortable forum. And part of that is we set ground rules about, when we're discussing this, it's a brave space. We're here to listen. We don't want to debate. We try to put aside differences we know about coming in and making sure that we're assuming positive intent. I also encourage folks to be authentic and be vulnerable, especially our leaders. Listen. I'll say it again, listen. These conversations aren't places for answers. We want to make sure that we're listening and understanding. Another tenet we try to hold here at Deloitte is that we don't put the burden on the people who are affected to educate others. So, the brave space is about people can come in and feel comfortable to share and connect, but not a place where we're asking folks to educate. And then finally, I think that, our leadership has set a tone that this is not a political issue. This is a human issue, which is why we're prioritizing it. And then, finally, we got to be willing to admit that we've made mistakes or that we have gaps in knowledge. And I think that goes back to being vulnerable.
Yeah, Cheryl.
Yeah, I would echo what Tina and Amy said, and I have a unique perspective probably in education, where we're seeing a lot of our medical students are very aware of issues that have arisen recently, and especially as they impact on healthcare. So being supportive, giving them a venue, helping their voices to be heard. I had a really eloquent student write a very moving piece about racism in healthcare, which I helped her to publish. I think introducing materials into the classroom, I'm really intentional about making sure it's diverse, the voices are diverse. And I think just being humble, being authentic, I think, as Amy said, that's the word that came to my mind when I first heard this question. Just being real with people and not assuming that you have any answers, but that you're willing to be a listening person.
Thank you. Our WLN members joining us today are not only leaders in their professions, but caretakers and their volunteers. How can we support one another during these times? And let's start with Tina.
I think we can support one another by simply picking up the phone and, making a phone call. Participating in events like this and asking questions. As I say, just checking in to see how folks are doing. I think because, social distancing, people working at home, that personal connection has kind of waned away, and I think we need to be intentional about making sure that we're checking in on the folks that we care about and the folks that we work with. And I'm a proponent about sending cards and thank you cards, and I do that a lot simply because I like people to know that they're important and I'm thinking about them. So going back to just simply writing down a little note to someone and putting it in the mail instead of maybe texting or emailing, making it a more personal touch.
Cheryl?
Yeah, I think that my approach has been to really try and be a problem solver. If there's a way that I can be helpful to others, whether it's through carpooling or assisting in some way. And I think I also have had a real intentionality about young people because they're spending so much more time on their screens. They're not having the social interaction. So just validating that there's another whole part of them that isn't technologically oriented and that they're doing a great job coping, that this isn't forever, it's going to get better, and just being affirming. And I think that extends to any time you can build somebody else up or just tell them you're doing a great job or I appreciate what you've done for me. I think those are all really important things.
Amy?
Yeah, I love that, the touch of taking the time to write notes. That's so great. One of the things I've really been trying to do is being very honest about my own challenges and boundaries and holding to them so that others feel empowered to do it as well. I think if we all rally together as women, like, we can make this happen. So I'm excited to do that. And then just promoting patience. I'm a big fan of patience and recognizing that everything is a season and we can be flexible right now. With myself, which is sometimes hard to do. I think we're all, very, very motivated individuals and we want to be successful, but, you can't, maybe this is a time for us to listen a little bit more to ourselves, just like we should be listening to other people. And then also making sure we're being patient and flexible with all the people around us, because there's no way to predict like what's happening kind of outside of that little Zoom screen that you see every day. I mean, you don't know what's going on in someone's life. So just extending as much grace as possible.
Yeah, I've really had to learn the whole patience thing, and it's working. Takes a little practice, but it's working. All right, so the impact of COVID-19 has everyone thinking about their health and how, about the importance of accessing healthcare. We've heard a lot of people have been not going to the doctor for regular checkups and stuff. I know in the beginning it was kind of, you're doing it more online and virtually, but the importance of that. And Cheryl, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. So I think that it also works the way of the providers have really been frustrated at not being able to provide the normal kind of healthcare because of not having patient contact directly as they may have in the past. It's really important to have access. I saw that when in my volunteer work this past summer and spring when the lockdown first occurred with people on the streets who had nothing. I mean, they had no shelter, no place to go to, and those were the hardest hit, of course, people without resources. I remember one individual saying to me, how can I wash my hands for 20 minutes when I don't have access to water? Mm-hmm. So access at its very basic level is super important. But I think another part of access that we can each do for ourselves that we haven't been focusing on as much is the healthier you are, the less likely you are to get sick from anything. So keeping yourself healthy, trying to eat, avoid that, the COVID-15, trying to exercise, trying to keep yourself in a good state so that you don't have to worry about getting access.
Tina?
Ditto what Cheryl said. I think it's important that we keep ourselves healthy, and there's things that you can do at home, but I also think it's important that you continue making sure you're getting your annual checkups, your annual physicals, mammograms, pap smears, all those things are so important, and getting your flu shots. Being on the community health initiatives end of it, we make sure we're going out to meet the needs of the community community instead of having them coming in. So mobile flu clinic coming up, our Healthy Harrisburg initiative that focuses on communities of color that have chronic disease. We started a social distancing fitness program. We're in our second 8-week cohort, which we're doing line dancing, we're doing virtual exercising. So just trying to do things a little differently to keep people healthy, but making sure taking that personal responsibility to do everything you need to do to make yourself healthy is important.
Yes, I had my first virtual visit, and I have to say, I actually enjoyed it and may do more of those because it's really so convenient. So please, ladies, and for your families, don't forget to take care of your own health. And I got the flu shot. Make sure you get that as well. So, my job, it's kind of stressful because it's 24/7. So we pretty much live the pandemic that's going on, and we also, the injustices that are going on, and just politics and everything as a whole. I find it hard to decompress. And I know that's important along with sleep. Ladies, I want to ask you, how do you find time to disconnect from that and just to really work on your physical and mental health? We'll start with Amy.
Yeah, so my mental health is something that I've been managing for a long time. I have anxiety and depression. I take medication for it. I think it's important for me to say that out loud because I have no shame, right? My brain chemicals are a little off. I take medication for it. If my heart was a little off, I would seek medication for that. So all that is to say is that there was no way that during the pandemic, I was going to let my mental health hygiene slip. And so I've really worked with my therapist to figure out how she and I can work best together virtually and have kept it on my calendar, protected it as best as I can. So that's a big part of me maintaining my sanity and my boundaries, because it's like a little pep talk every week to remind me that, the voices, the narrative in my head isn't always reality. And it's okay if I'm not working 18 hours a day. So for me, I think it's really been about enforcing the boundaries and holding on to the things that I would describe as the pillars in my life, which mental health is probably the top one.
Thanks for sharing that. I think a lot of people grapple with that, but they're sometimes afraid to say something, and it's important that you get help for that. Cheryl.
Yeah, I would say for me, my faith community is really important. And one of the great things about COVID is you can zoom into a lot of things and resources that may not have been readily available in the past. So that's a plus. I also have had episodes of depression and know that when I'm inside and it's gloomy and, the negative thoughts can accumulate. So getting outside, getting some fresh air, looking at how beautiful the trees are, focusing on some of the positive, if you can do that, is really important. Getting enough sleep. I'm hearing a lot about sleep patterns being disrupted and people not being able to sleep. I think it's because of all the screen time we're getting, but that's just a theory. So trying to promote rest. If you can't, get sleep, at least trying to build some rest time into your day or into your schedule. And just connecting with your support network. I know Facebook gets slammed for a lot of bad things, but find a great supportive women. I have one that I check in with, pretty regularly, not every day, not every hour, but just having like-minded women that you can connect with about some of the issues. And we know that it's a very gendered reaction to COVID. Women are at home with the kids more likely than the men. So just being able to connect with people and get some support in that way, I think those are all things that I would suggest.
Tina.
I think, I echo what both Cheryl and Amy said. But one of the things as women we need to do a better job at is communicating when we're not okay. And I think we hide that so well. And sometimes it's just when you're sitting in a space and you have all these things that are impacting you, racism, COVID, access to health, all the children working from home, husbands, sometimes you really need to sit and say, I'm not okay, and seek out those circles of friends, medical help to get the support you need. And understand that if you're feeling a certain way, you're not the only one. We're in a different space and time right now, and we really need to look for different ways to support one another. You know, having a monthly, I see some people have monthly and weekly happy hours where they tune in, you know, on Friday with a glass of wine and just to chat about certain things. And also setting up those boundaries. At one point, I realized I was on the phone from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. on a Zoom call or FaceTime or another meeting. And I was so exhausted. And I had to realize, like, okay, I cannot handle 15 calls in one day back to back to back. So I had to set a boundary on how many Zoom meetings I would have, because it's exhausting. And even though we may not be in the workspace and at home, you have other things that are behind it: the dog, the children, who's going to make the lunch, trying to teach first grade math, which you need a PhD for now. So again, making sure you set those boundaries and find that support group you need to help you.
I have to say the House Party app has been a savior. So you can get together with your friends and have an adult beverage or your beverage of choice. And I found that to be very therapeutic, actually. I'm very extroverted. I'm very social. So to be on lockdown from all my friends has been tough, but we know why we have to do it. But that is one way to kind of let go and have a little bit of fun from the safety of your home while you're having that adult beverage, another benefit. All right, so we're getting questions from you, and we thank you for sending them in. And here's the first one, ladies. We've seen a record number of women leaving the workforce in the past 2 months, almost double the number than men. What should we be focused on in our communities to help and support the women and families with regard to mental health issues and income challenges for women and families who may not have experienced these needs in the past? And we're seeing that more and more. Tina?
One of the things we should be aware of are the resources that are available throughout our community. And I'm saying in South Central Pennsylvania, there are many resources to help individuals with food and housing and making sure you're connecting with them. We have 211 where you can connect with mental health services and other services that you may need. So understanding and knowing where to go and helping individuals navigate those organizations is very important. I think we just need to put it out there and support individuals that are going through hard times.
Amy?
Yeah, Tina makes a great point about helping educate others and educating ourselves on what's available. I know that Deloitte, my employer, offers a lot of benefits, including backup dependent care services. And pre-COVID, I don't think everyone was aware of this benefit. So trying to make sure that, my professionals, my constituents understand that there are backup care benefits. There's reimbursements for some things. There's things that we've done special because of COVID. There's things that the CARES Act has asked us to provide for our employees. So just really making sure that you're taking advantage of your benefits from your employer, from your communities, because you're paying for those, right? You're paying for those at your employer, you're paying taxes in your community. And so there's nothing wrong with asking for help. There's nothing wrong with using something that is meant to try to make things easier in a time that's difficult.
Cheryl?
Yeah, I would echo those excellent suggestions and say, too, that when a woman is leaving her job because of COVID, it's not because she wants to leave her job. And so there's a whole mental coping that needs to take place and like reconfiguring your life. Like, what can I do now? Can I be an entrepreneur from home? Can I barter services with a colleague? How can we lift each other up and be supportive? Because it is, as I said before, a very gendered response, and women are getting hit more intensively than men, and so we need to step up and support each other more fully than we have in the past.
And I know the United Way also offers services, so if you have a friend that's in need, you can also refer them there. And the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank has also been doing a fantastic job partnering with local pantries to make sure that people get the food they need. So you can also look to those resources as well. So next question, how do we stay informed during this time of negative news? And we'll start with Amy.
I do not know. No. I mean, I find that I have been very discerning about the information I let come into my home and into my space and into my brain. So, no offense meant, I don't watch a lot of TV these days. I prefer to seek out information in a format that I can read because it's easier for me to take and internalize. And then, I would say just always look for more than one source. I mean, I'm by no means an expert on this, but it's always so interesting to me to see how the headlines change as you go from one source to the next about the same story. And, we have to be confident in our own truth. And I'm a big fan of science, so I always look to scientists when I'm trying to figure out what's going on with COVID.
Cheryl.
Yeah, I've had that same question myself. As a person in science, I've seen even like medical journals retracting articles because they were published when they shouldn't have been. And so my stance has just been like, I have a good brain and everybody out there watching has a good brain, and to be an investigator myself and just don't stop with one source. Check out the statistics, but look at more than one place, talk to people, hear what people have to say. I try and be really discerning about what I read and what I watch on television because, as mentioned by the questioner, it can be conflicting information. So just kind of seeking the truth from reliable sources, like Val.
Thank you. Tina?
So my motto is there's two sides to every story. The truth lies somewhere in the middle, and you have to do your own research. Don't believe everything you hear and read. Seek out the experts. And fortunate enough, there are some individuals that work in certain spaces that I consider experts and that I go to after I've read an article or heard something, and I will just make sure, is this true or not? How much of this do we believe? And so I think you have to do your homework really and not fall into the trap of believing the first story that you hear, because sometimes, as you'd say, it's retracted or people will take, a couple steps back.
Even as a journalist, I always multiply my sources and go to different locations to find the information that I need. And I think it's important that, as you heard from all these ladies, you think for yourself and really, do your own research. People are, we're human, and so people can make mistakes. And so you really need to go and find multiple sources. And I agree with you. I go with the science, Amy. I definitely go with the science. All right, so how do we rethink volunteerism in a time of social distancing? So let's start with Tina.
How do you rethink volunteerism and social distancing? You can do it. I mean, there's a way. Again, wearing your mask, hand sanitizer, depending on what the project is, making sure that the spaces that you're in are following guidelines also. But again, I think if you have been a volunteer or willing to volunteer, take those steps to do what's necessary to just go out and help others that are in need. I don't think it's something that we need to stop doing. I think it's probably things that we need to do more of. Again, simple things as packing toiletry bags, or what I call now, and what I've done is packing bags with hand sanitizer, mask, and gloves, and handing them out, as you travel, throughout the city or your journey, and just, providing them for folks who may not have the resources to obtain them. So little things that you can do to help, and seeking out organizations that have volunteer opportunities. I think it's important, especially during this time.
Cheryl.
Yeah, I would say not to be afraid to volunteer, because I think fear can keep us immobilized. And I know right at the height of the lockdown, when I decided that I would go down to the YMCA where they were offering showers, I was questioning that, but I felt so safe because I probably took more precautions there than I do in my normal life when I'm out and about. So don't let fear stop you from volunteering, and also think about different ways of volunteering that might be, clean out your cupboards, and if something isn't expired and you can give it to the food bank, do that. If you can be a resource to somebody in your neighborhood who needs a helping hand, do that. So just thinking of micro volunteering too, I think can be very helpful.
Thank you, Cheryl. Amy.
Yeah, I love one of my favorite parts about the pandemic, if we could say we had a favorite part, is just the creativity it's forced in a lot of ways. And so, um, we in my community, I've seen a lot of, drive-through, no contact food drives. I know my family and I, we volunteer with an organization that collects bags of food off people's porches and it goes to the schools in our district. And so we volunteered to be the family that drove around and picked up the bags and took them to the school. So, that didn't involve us having contact with anyone. And then I would say the point about, we had extra paper towels or we had extra sanitizer wipes, and giving that to organizations that are doing social work, so that the burden of having to fight COVID on top of fighting some of the other things that they're working towards isn't on them. So, not being afraid, I think, is great advice, and just finding some way to give back. I know personally, like, that also helped my mental health. That was something that we started doing to help us feel like we weren't helpless or victims in this situation.
Yeah, that's also good. My church does a pantry, so we're, gloved and we have our mask on and we have a little distance between the clients we serve, but it's so nice to still just have some contact. I know you're making a difference in helping someone, especially at a time when they're in need. Well, what advice can you give women who are actively in the job search at this time during such a difficult time? It seems everything out there has such unrealistic requirements and it feels like everything is out of reach. Cheryl.
Yeah, I actually, I work with a group of students who are looking at placements in residency right now, and they're going through some of the same struggles of how do you go through the job application process during a time of COVID. I don't have big answers, but I think one answer is like getting comfortable on Zoom, because so many interviews and so much interaction takes place on Zoom now, and there's a whole skill set as to how you do that and what you have in your background, where you look, what you wear, all of those kinds of things. Get some friends to look at your resume, some supportive friends that have a similar profession to you. Look at your resume, see if you can recraft it to be eligible for some jobs you may not have thought of in the past, but which might be appealing to you now. But I think we're all going to have to be a little more flexible in terms of what we're willing to do over Zoom and what parts of our job we're able to do remotely.
Tina.
And I think the word flexible and being fluid are so important during this time. And I think being persistent also, polish up your resume, get the tips that you need in doing interviews over Zoom, but also be persistent about the job that you want, and stand out in any way that you can. People don't do thank you cards, that much anymore. Maybe that's something that you want to incorporate into your repertoire when you're interviewing. Do your research on the folks that you're interviewing with so that you're ready to respond to questions, and making sure you just have those tips and tools so that you can make the connection. But be persistent is very important.
Amy?
I think that's all great advice. I love the tips about Zoom. The other thing is, I'll speak for where I work. Our recruiting has, basically flipped to all virtual. I don't know that we've slowed down. So I would say, have hope. I think that there are opportunities out there. Be flexible, be persistent. And then the only thing I might add is that I do think, because we're experiencing, a national dip in jobs, and it's the conversation is right in front of us, that there are a lot of people, organizations offering help for resume writing or reskilling. And I would say, Google some of those things to find out if there are additional resources in your community that could teach you a new skill that you could use on your resume to make it stand out a little bit more. But, I think that a lot of folks are looking for ways to invest their time, and there are opportunities out there to try to help.
Thank you, ladies. Our there resources like authors and writers that you utilize to guide you during challenging times? And let's start with Cheryl.
Oh yeah, I have my go-to authors and writers that I find really reassuring, and I've turned to podcasts as well. I really like some of the memoirs that I've read lately. I am particularly fond of Patrice Gaines, who's a writer for the Washington Post, who overcame a lot of obstacles in her life to become a very successful journalist. I'm always looking for, I am searching out new things to read, and I take great comfort, especially in those memoirs and stories of other people's lives, whether they're like just little blurbs online that I read, or whether there's something I seek out and go through the whole book.
Tina.
So I wouldn't say there was one per se, but I've been reading a lot around racism and racial justice. I'm halfway through. It's a book around racism and how it impacts the mental, physical, and emotional health of people of color. White Fragility is another book that I read. Other books on unconscious bias, implicit bias in the workplace, and how to work through that as organizations. So that's what I've been reading a lot in the past several weeks. So Black Fatigue is the name of the one book that I'm reading right now. I'm reading about health equity and health disparities and the impact on communities of color. So just trying to enhance and support individuals that are working in trauma-informed care and anti-racist work to add to that conversation.
Amy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read to escape. So, I've never been a big nonfiction reader. It's changed a little bit recently, but so I will say that I recently started reading Jasmine Guillory's books. They're like chick lit. But the thing about that is that I was trying to be intentional about diversifying the authors that I was reading. And so I picked up her books. I read, and I also follow on Instagram, Ijeoma Olu. And she writes, So You Want to Talk About Racism? Mm-hmm. I might have my book titles getting mixed up. But, she, I think, has a great perspective. She speaks a lot in a corporate format, which I appreciate. And then, for my news, I'm a big fan of the Talking Points memo. I read the Washington Post. And I don't know, like, we call it snackable learning bites at Deloitte. Like, that's a term, I guess, that's used in learning. Is it snackable? And so, I mean, I don't want to sound shallow, but I do believe that Instagram is wonderful for just getting exposure to different people and what different people are talking about, and different movements like outside of your bubble. And so I've really leaned into that, and have tried to seek out people who have a point of view that I think is fact-based or science-based, but that know more than me. And so I can look at what they're reading and all sorts of other things there.
Yeah, snackable is a term we use in television. You're absolutely correct. And I have so much regular reading I have to do just for my job in different newspapers. So I've become a Netflix person, and I'm running out of stuff to watch. But I'm really bad because I binge watch everything. So that's how I like decompress my mind for like hours at a time on a Saturday or a Sunday sometimes. So that's my take on things. All right, so how can our community come out stronger from this? And we are a very, very, very strong community. We like to say we're mid-state strong. So Cheryl, why don't you start?
I think we're already improving in terms of just supporting each other, revving up our food banks, revving up the services that we provide to people, making connections with neighbors that you maybe would have passed by ordinarily. Now you stop. I walk a lot, and it's amazing how many people say, hi, how are you doing? People that I would have passed before that really, wouldn't have really noticed me, or I noticed them. I think our young people are really amazing to me. I've seen the students and their activism and how dedicated they are to making things better. Things that I quite frankly wasn't aware of when I was a student or didn't really give much thought to because it was off my radar. But I think we're seeing a new generation of healthcare providers particularly who are going to be focused on what's really important to people and their healthcare and their health needs. But just young people, all even younger than students who are in medical school, looking at the young women that are in my organizations and hearing about the amazing things they're doing to support younger people, support their colleagues and peers. It's really kind of encouraging to me. It's sad that it took a pandemic and all of the other conflicts that are occurring to make that happen, but I really have a sense of optimism about the future.
Amy?
I'm the same. I'm hopeful. We did meet our neighbors. We didn't know them before the pandemic, but, our neighbors have 7 kids. And we basically created a bubble with them because it gave my kids social interaction, which was amazing. I think Zoom has made things more accessible. So, it's taken out commute time or car time. So, like, I think it was Cheryl mentioned, like, I can Zoom into church very consistently. I can attend PTA meetings. Like, there's no sort of juggling the schedule when it comes to relocating geographically for many different things. And so I think probably we're all a little bit more in contact than we used to be, and it's tiring, but I'm hoping that the connection stays.
Tina?
Agree, ditto with what they said. But I think one of the things that will take us to the next level, and I say this to all women who are in a leadership position, in a position of power, find that individual that it may be looking for a job or looking to move up and become a mentor. I think you're right, Cheryl, when you said our young people, they are getting it. They are doing some hard work that needs to be done throughout our community. How can we provide them the space and opportunities that were provided for us so that they can continue to navigate and make changes? So I challenge all of you who are leaders, open up your access to individuals that may not look like you, may not come from the places that you come from. So, and show them what you're doing and help them, along in their career development. I don't think we talk about that a lot, but I think it's so important. That's how we're going to really create change throughout our community.
And what have you learned about yourself during these times? Amy?
I learned that I really, I'm a homebody. I mean, this has really allowed my introvert to just flourish, isolation. The other thing I learned is that I need to work with my hands, which is not something my job allows me to do. So I've been seeking out craft projects, which I never would have guessed that's where we'd be with me, quilting in 2020.
Nice. Tina?
Oh my goodness, I've learned so much about myself during these past several months. And I think one of the things that I learned is to be more vulnerable and not always have that shield up. I've been through a lot these past 2 years and still going through, but I know I'm going to be okay, and I know everything will be okay, but just being in a space where, as I said before, it's okay not to be okay sometimes.
Cheryl?
Well, like you, Val, I've discovered a tremendous capacity within me to binge Netflix, and it doesn't end with Netflix either, it's Apple TV. But I think some of the maybe positive things I've learned about myself is that I've always been a very people person and a very social person. I've never been happy to work at home. And I've discovered that I can work at home and I can be productive and I can substitute in-person contact for technological contact either through emails or texting or face-to-face and Zooming. So I think I've learned that. I think I've learned the importance of faith, obviously, just to get me through those dark times and the times when it seems like there is no hope. Having faith that this has happened before. If you look at the history of the world, there have been difficult times and they've gone away and gotten better. So I think I've learned all of those things.
Yeah, one thing I think I've learned is a lot of times in our profession, we're out doing community events. So we're here and we're there and we're everywhere on Saturdays and Sundays and running around. And it's been, first being an introvert, I missed a lot of people, but I've been spending more time with my family and doing more things together. And I think I'm going to miss that when we get back to normal. So I'm going to have to carve out time to do that. And what are groups like our Women's Leadership Network? Why are they so important? And we're going to start with Amy.
There's a phrase, if you see her, you can be her. And I'm not sure where it came from, but I believe in that. I think representation is so important. And I think that groups that bring leaders together where there is a variety, diverse set of people doing different things in different places inspires people. And then I also think that, Lindsay Huff, who actually is a friend of mine that lives in Harrisburg, she said to me, we're as strong as the woman next to us. And I believe in that too. Like, I think that there's something special about creating circles or horseshoes or sisterhoods, whatever you want to call it, where we can all be vulnerable and learn from each other, as long as those spaces are inclusive and intersectional and are inviting people in as much as possible.
Tina.
So I think my favorite phrase is women, there's a cold place somewhere for women who don't help other women. And I think, it's so important and so valuable that we support other women and we have conversations like this. I've been a long time member for the Women's Leadership Network. I think I was there when it was first started. And so I enjoyed learning from other women and connecting with other women and creating these circles where you can have authentic conversations and build friendship and relationships. So I think, continuing to have conversations and supporting one another is very important.
Cheryl.
Yeah, I think that women, there was some really interesting research done by Shelley Taylor, who's a professor at, I believe, UCLA in California, looking at how women cope during times of stress. We always hear about that fight or flight response, but women aren't like that. And she found through psychological and physiological study that women tend and befriend. I love that. So in times of need, in times of difficulty, we gather close, we connect, we tend and befriend, and that's how we get through. So I think having a venue that is like-minded women who share your passion, who can support and uplift you, who can listen and resonate with the issues that you're bringing up is vital at a time like this.
Yeah, I've met many good friends through WLN that I know will be lifetime ones, like Tina. And so our workplaces are filled with multiple generations working together. What differences have you seen in how they process COVID-19 and racial equality? And let's start with Amy.
Oh man, I am Gen X, and here's what I know is that I don't process things the same way as my coworkers who are millennials, or what are we on, Gen Z. And I think that's okay. And it's important for me to listen and to be open to how other people need to process things. And so what I've noticed is that the younger generation of folks that I work with are much better at articulating what they need. So, my team had a meeting with me a week ago to talk about, okay, how are we going to create psychological safety around the election? Which is like nothing I would have ever thought of as a Gen Xer. But I'm grateful that they brought it to me, because it means other people are thinking about it as well. And we need to think and we need to consider it. And what should we be doing, or helping other people understand that this is something that's on people's minds. So I think their willingness to be vulnerable is a little bit higher. To me, like intergenerational relationships or like the diversity across the generations is pretty fascinating. And I know that we tend to weaponize that sometimes, but I think as long as we don't assume that any one generation is wrong, that it's additive to the experience.
Tina.
I think there's so many carrots that you can take from, I think there's 5 generations that are in the workplace currently, and each is unique because of their own worldviews. But especially with the younger generation and them being brave enough to have a voice, bring it to the table, share their experiences, and also in helping us learn how we can address some of the issues that impact our community. So I embrace that. I think it's wonderful, from the youngest person in our organization to the most senior person. I use as tools to help navigate some of the things that we go through, because we don't have all the right answers, but collectively we can come up with the right answers that meets the needs of our organization.
Cheryl?
Yeah, I think that when I was growing up, I always thought the adults would take care of the problems. And I see in the generations now that they're much more, we're going to take care of the problem and address the problem, much more activist, whether it be creating a TikTok or making a video game that brings, there's a new video game going around, I think it's called At Home, that the kids came up with, that connects in a very healthy, fun way with each other. I think that they're much more action oriented in processing, and I don't think that they may see the boundaries that I might have seen as a young person, that that's not my role, or I can't do that. I think that there's a lot of empowerment in the younger generation, and that's going to see them through and help them triumph through this pandemic.
And my personal question for all of you panelists is, what brings you hope? And let's start with Cheryl.
I guess kind of the things I've alluded to already. I take great hope. I'm a fan of history, and I just watched The White Princess, one of the series I binged on Netflix the other night, and things were horrible in England back then, and there was plague then. And so it's a good thing to look at history and have hope that we survive things and we come through stronger and we persevere into the future. The next generation gives me hope, and just our endless ability to be creative in addressing problems. I've seen a lot of creativity that's really inspirational, whether that be writing or scientific discoveries or however it manifests.
Tina?
I would say the next generation, my children, bring me hope, and seeing what's taking place throughout our country, and seeing the young people on the front lines and demonstrating as it relates to rights and equal rights and racial justice, that brings me hope.
Amy?
Yeah, the younger generation definitely brings me hope in their ability to just be so convicted in their ideals. But I'll say another thing that brings me hope is people's capacity to change. I don't think it's been easy the past 6 or 7 months, right? Like, we've all had to change the way we work. There's been a lot of change in terms of, like, what do we talk about with each other? And we talked about kind of how race conversations can be difficult. But I think over the past few months, I've seen a lot of folks change their point of view and sort of join the movement. And that really gives me hope that we still have the capacity to change, to listen to each other, and to do what needs to be done.
Thank you, ladies. And what brings me hope is faith. We want to thank the panel members for joining us today. And we want to thank all of you for sending in your questions. And remember, if they weren't hit on today, they will be responded to after the session is over. It is now my pleasure to introduce Jashana McLeod, Chair of the Women's Leadership Network.
Thank you, Val, and thank you to all of our panelists. Today we discussed many important topics, including the importance of access to healthcare. The United Way has been committed to this issue since launching Contact to Care in 2017. This pilot project connects individuals to care in a primary medical home. Today, we would like to share with you a brief video showing the impact of our work on real people in our community.
It is so hard to get connected into a network of health professionals and stuff. It shouldn't be so complicated, but they really did take a lot of the complication out of it.
Contact to Care started 3 years ago, and initially it started in Harrisburg City, providing people with connections to a primary care provider as well as to health insurance. One of the significant factors in people not accessing health care is often not understanding the system as well as not trusting it. And so our health workers really build that engagement.
If they don't know where to turn for health insurance, or if they don't know where to turn for medical, dental, just to get a primary care doctor, they're not going to go to the doctor. So if we can help them and be guidance, I think they would be more apt to go and get the medical care that they need.
I met Tiffany when I lived in Kansas. She was only 9 years old and was my neighbor. And we've kept in touch on and off over the years. And last fall, they got in touch with me and they were having some difficult times, especially with housing. I finally said, why don't you come here with me, because I know a lot more of the landscape of providers and helpers.
When we first met Tiffany and Nicole, they were not working. Now they're riding transportation on their own. They're both working. They've come a long way since joining this program.
We didn't have to contact anybody. They did it all for us, and then they helped us get transportation to go to these appointments. So we didn't even have to do that step. All we had to do was call or text, and they made appointments for us, which was awesome.
Phenomenal.
Their lives have completely changed for the better. That feels really good to just know that we made a difference.
I would like to thank the United Way and their donor organizations. We're seeing significant change and a change in people's mindset in terms of how they see healthcare, all because of the work done by this organization and its partners.
Please don't stop this program because it definitely is a lifesaver.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you. That's
Definitely.
I have a lot of gratitude for this program.
Thanks to the Contact Care pilot project, 550 individuals have insurance and 782 individuals have a primary medical home. If you've ever wondered if your gift to the United Way makes a difference, just look at the change in Nicole and Tiffany's lives. Your support helped make that change happen. As many of you know, the United Way's fundraising campaign is currently underway. In these unprecedented times, the United Way is needed now more than ever in our communities. We help individuals and families get back on track with our proven programs in access to healthcare, basic needs, school readiness, and workforce development. So I ask you to please join me in supporting the United Way this year. Today's WLN event, which was a wonderful event, is just one of our many activities this year. In the coming weeks, you will be receiving a request to please donate new or gently used purses for our first impression kits. These kits will go to women in our community who are entering the workforce through our workforce development pilot project called Road to Success. So look out for more information on that soon. I would like to thank our sponsors, our gold sponsors, Highmark Blue Shield and Penn State Health, our silver sponsors, Brown, Schultz, Sheridan, and Fritz, the Hershey Company, KPMG LLP, Penn National, and JPL. I would also like to thank the United Way Foundation for its support. Finally, I hope you will continue to participate in WLN this year. We encourage you to share the message of WLN and the United Way with your female colleagues. In difficult times like this, WLN leaders have always risen to the occasion through giving, volunteering, and sharing the message. Our time is now. And for those of you who are not members, please, we invite you to join us, and we will be following up with you post-event. So thank you for joining us today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.